go. Hey guys, Dimitry here with Richard Carleton, the CEO of the Canadian Securities Exchange. The Canadian Securities Exchange, a little background, started in 2003. Richard, self-described recovering lawyer, litigator, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll watch my words with you. Took over as CEO, I believe it was 2011. And I think, if I'm not mistaken at the time, somewhere between 2003 and 2011, the Canadian Securities Exchange as a startup, as basically a platform for startup companies to come in and raise funding and get investors and give everybody an opportunity to win, give entrepreneurs, starting companies an opportunity to capitalize, finance, and grow, give opportunities for investors to find great opportunities to help those companies grow and win on the back end. But between 03 and 11, the exchange was struggling.
Yep.
And you needed to recapitalize, you needed to restructure it. So I guess there's going to be some very interesting questions that I want to ask as it relates to the companies on the exchange and kind of like your broad view of what's happening in the world today and those companies in light of it. But before I go there, you're coming into a struggling organization with a lot of difficult conversations. People are facing that right now. In my company, every company, we're facing that right now. Take us through that time a little bit.
Well, I think the big advantage that we had was a very committed, close-knit, and relatively small team at that point, deeply experienced in the capital markets. And I think what carried us through the difficult times was a shared passion for what we were trying to achieve. Even though it had taken a lot longer than anybody had thought to get to a point where we were, all of those things that entrepreneurs hope for: cash flow positive, EBITDA positive, and then ultimately, net income on the balance sheet. We felt very, very strongly in the mission, which was to increase access to public capital for entrepreneurs, not just in Canada, but from the United States and internationally across a wide range of businesses. And part of what drove us was how things had changed in the investment process. With the advent of internet technologies and discount brokerage and new means of empowering investors to do research and have access to real time, basically, to corporate information and filings. We felt that there was a vast pool of untapped capital that could be made available to entrepreneurs if we did if we reduced the friction. We provided a better path to the public markets for entrepreneurial companies, as I said, in Canada and abroad. So again, we did have the difficult conversations. We had to run lean. We had to, some of us on the management team had to accept significant salary reductions, and I think I self-funded my expenses for a couple of years. I mean,
you were an entrepreneur.
all of the things that you know about. But I think what was really powerful for the organization, and again, I mean, I'm obviously saying this now, 9 years in the rearview mirror, was that not only did it validate the passion and the idea that we had around the establishment of the organization, but it really gave us a sense of having walked in the entrepreneur's shoes as well. So when we meet with folks that are looking to get their companies listed, to raise capital from investors, to realize their own entrepreneurial dreams, we literally have walked a mile in those shoes. So we know how they're thinking, the things that they've gone through, because again, understand, if they're talking to us, they've already been through, a fairly significant portion of the Darwinian life cycle. So they've proven to be adaptable enough to survive to the level where they can attract outside public investment. And so they're already sort of pretty far along that road, and they've been through, as I said, all of the things that we did. So, they've woken up in the cold sweat at 3 o'clock in the morning, worrying about all sorts of things.
Can we not go there right now?
And it's always 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But and of course, most of the things you had no control over anyway. So, but we've all been there. And as I say, the fact that we had that sense of mission combined with the experience of having to, go right to the edge, basically. I think gave us an even more powerful connection with our customer base.
So let me ask you a question. You're a Toronto litigator. Obviously, you went to law school. You got into a firm. Your wife's a partner at a very prestigious law firm. I mean, you've paid your dues before going the entrepreneurial route. Why take that risk?
Transitioning from a lawyer to a business person was not easy. It required a very, very significant mindset change. I love to come up with sort of glib sayings, and my big concern when I did make that transition was that I felt I was either being an overcautious business person or a sloppy lawyer. Because you can't be always imagining or determining the risks. You have to be instead looking for the opportunity and managing the risks that appear along the way. And that's a difficult mindset. I mean, it's not, there are very few lawyers who wind up being successful business people. As I say, I would certainly at this point probably not make a very good lawyer anymore, having developed more of a damn the torpedoes attitude when it comes to risk assessment and risk management. With that, of course, I can't let my general counsel see this presentation, of course. But yeah, it really does require a significant mindset change when I took the role change. But for me, and really this did come from my training as a litigator. And one of the things I found attractive about litigation practice was you got to learn a lot about different things. And so I was doing a lot of professional negligence work in medical malpractice, construction, professional liability, and so on. And you actually would have to become not a subject matter expert, but you got to learn a lot about different things. And, that appealed to me also in business because, again, I had an opportunity with a wide-ranging portfolio of business operations at the Toronto Stock Exchange some years back. And now with the Canadian Securities Exchange, I mentioned, obviously, we're engaging regularly with entrepreneurs like yourself, but there's also a very significant operations role. We have high-performance computer technology networking that we set up with, and that's a very significant part of our service delivery, is to provide state-of-the-art technology platform in order for people to buy and sell stocks. So again, every day is different. I learn something new every day, and that keeps it fresh and keeps me going.
There's a couple of things I want to comment that you said that really hit me. Like I tell my lawyer too, I say, your job as a lawyer is to see the risks, because a lot of times they're like, Dimitry, that's stupid. And I go, no, your job is to see the risks. My job is to see the opportunity. That's, lawyers and entrepreneurs are actually on the opposite end of the scale. Like as a lawyer, to be successful, you sometimes have to be hopelessly pessimistic. I know that because, you mentioned medical malpractice. Well, Tony, head of medical litigation at Bennett Jones, or at least you were when you were my client in Calgary. If you're watching this, hello. I know a lot of lawyers and litigators in that field because I personally serviced very, very many of them, especially at Bennett Jones, which was kind of home for me. But then, you talk about overcoming this mindset and kind of being an entrepreneur, which you have to be a little bit almost hopelessly optimistic sometimes. You have to have a disability to be an entrepreneur, and that you have to not see some obstacles. That's a fact. And most people look at those obstacles, and it's not just going from lawyer to entrepreneur, although I think that jump is a lot more significant because your training as a lawyer is risk mitigation in all circumstances and follow correct procedure. As an entrepreneur, it's like, well, it's not about risk mitigation. It's almost about like opportunity mitigation. And then of course, it's not about standard procedure. It's about creatively overcoming something in a very non-linear path. But I think for a lot of people listening to this that are not lawyers, that are just entrepreneurs, everybody, I wasn't a lawyer, but you got to overcome yourself. That's really the lesson, isn't it?
Any business initiative that I've been involved in at this point, I feel uncomfortable if somebody doesn't look me in the eye and say, "You're out of your mind. This is never going to work." Because if somebody doesn't tell me that, then I know I'm probably on the wrong track. So, Yeah, I mean, it's a comfort with being told you're crazy. We've all read the books and the stories about, Fred Smith got a C minus or something on the FedEx business
Mm-hmm.
plan at
Mm-hmm.
business school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we were told setting up the Canadian Securities Exchange that, Canada didn't need another exchange. You guys are crazy. What are you doing? It's you're out of your minds, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I mean, that fortunately helps drive me, not discourages us at this point.
What's a typical revenue of a company that's listed on the Canadian Securities Exchange?
Well, one of the unique characteristics about Canadian capital markets, not just the CSE, but generally, is that we provide an awful lot of finance to pre-revenue companies.
Okay.
So if you think about mining and oil and gas exploration, for example, by definition, they're pre-revenue. They're raising money to go poke a hole in the ground. And in the case of the oil guys, they have a pretty good sense of what's going to come out when they poke the hole in the ground. In the case of the hard rock miners, it's a greater mystery, of course. But also in the life sciences space, the technology space, we're very much dealing with companies that are sort of late stage in terms of the development, but may not, in fact, have a product in the hands of paying customers yet. So, and as I say, that's kind of unique. Really, Australia is the only other capital market in the world. Also, of course, a resource extraction economy generally. That has a history of providing public finance for these pre-revenue companies. The better benchmark, I think, is to talk about enterprise value.
Okay.
And generally, the average size company is valued sort of between $12 and $20 million. Now, we obviously have a wide range of companies because with our success over the last few years, especially in the cannabis space, we have companies that have listed on us particularly from the United States, whose enterprise value is in the billions at this point. So obviously a big step up in class for the Canadian Securities Exchange from a traditional early stage Canadian small cap space.
Who are some of your biggest success stories?
Well, I hate to sort of, say that there are success stories because the companies that have done well, it's a tribute to, their passion, commitment, and talent in terms of identifying a particular market or opportunity. But what I will say is that, we did early on, and I'm now talking about the spring of 2014, identify the cannabis space as one that was going to be important. And, those entrepreneurs, I mean, it's always hard to raise capital. Capital is scarce, whether it's private equity, whether it's public markets. But the cannabis guys, they had nothing. I mean, they couldn't get bank loans, they couldn't get credit cards, they couldn't have mortgages for their grow operations. The only place they could turn to were the public capital markets, and even most venues were turning them away. And so we concluded, having done some risk management analysis, that we were comfortable with the risks of supporting that industry. And within a relatively short period of time, we had, I think, 30 companies from the space, I think by the middle of 2014. We were then approached by the folks from the United States who had similar issues as their Canadian peers did as far as arranging for financing. And again, we worked closely with the industry in the United States and effectively helped capitalize to the tune of many billions of dollars. These companies who are on the verge of becoming household names, at least in certain households in the United States at this point, but certainly the largest and most dominant players in markets like California, Florida, Illinois, Colorado, and so on. Mm-hmm. So we're very pleased and proud of the work that we did with the cannabis industry. I make no apologies. I'm not going to snicker about it or anything else.
Well, no, I'm thinking of
I have to admit, though, the jokes back in the day, I thought they might get old, but they don't. We've laughed along with the founders of the industry. And as I say, I'm very, very pleased with the work that we did with those folks.
They do giggle a lot, and I was, I was thinking more like if I'm a smart entrepreneur right now, I'm watching where those cannabis companies are taking off, and I have a strategic map of where to put my donut shops, and I think I'm gonna do okay. That's now. Let me. So, and the money that's coming into fund these companies. Who's investing the money? It's not private individuals. It's probably wealth managers, funds. Where's that money coming from to capitalize?
Actually, no.
Really?
As I talked about, the changes in the whole investment management process, we've seen a real bifurcation of how it works out. So, on the one hand, you have the the institutions and the wealth management firms and the big hedge funds. And by and large, they're playing in the large cap space, right? So they're buying the banks and the insurance companies and major oil producers and consumer packaged goods companies and so on. But what you see in the early stage space is it's primarily retail investors.
Really?
So it's you and me sitting down at the end of the day or in the morning with our discount brokerage account open, maybe doing a little bit of analysis. Oh yeah, this company looks good. Their drill results look promising. Oh, that's a very, whatever. And that's where, in fact, the majority of the investors come from. Now, what happens when you get interest in various segments, whether it's in, like, for example, recently gold mining has been an area of great interest. You'll see a couple of things. So a lot of retail investment participation. And then secondly, there are specialty funds that work in the small cap areas that will do so-called private placements. So they will put in without making the company go through a prospectus, because these investors are deemed to be accredited or sophisticated investors, that they will put money in usually in significant amounts, 5, 8, 10, $20 million, sometimes considerably more. And so the company is able to raise substantial sums of money, both from these private investment funds as well as individual investors as well.
But how do these folks find these companies to invest in? I mean, are they actively looking for these investment opportunities on the exchange?
Absolutely.
So how do you market? So you're marketing to them?
Yeah, that's certainly a part of the activities. Absolutely. In some respects, it's never been easier with the tools that we have, whether it's social media, email, all the electronic forms of communication. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of noise out there as well. So engaging with a very specific community, and you deal with this all the time in terms of your own marketing and promotional activities, is how do you convey a very credible, sophisticated message to your target audience?
For sure. So how do you?
Well, I'm not sure I have the answer yet. We try a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's like that old marketing joke, right? The executive says, I'm wasting half my marketing money, but if somebody could tell me which half it was, I'd.
Technical difficulties are a part of working from home, and that's actually a little bit cool. I like this, and I'll say this too right now, that I like that happens, because I think there's a lot of comedy in this right now. Like, I'm talking to the CEO of the Canadian Securities Exchange wearing his lumberjack shirt at home. And we're having internet issue just like every schmo in the world, and it's kind of funny. Richard, let me ask you a question. Right now, the world is going through a turbulent time. Businesses are just stuff's happening with the coronavirus. Things are closing and nothing is open. And it's just, how's this affecting the companies that you see on the Securities Exchange?
Well, I guess there's a variety of impact. Here in the province of Ontario, where I live, the government is ordering a full lockdown that goes into effect this evening. Now, of course, the list of businesses that were declared essential is actually pretty long. My joke this morning when I saw it was it might have been easier to have a list of what had to close. But the long and the short of it is that Some companies will continue to operate, and in fact, one of the slightly humorous things about the last few weeks is that the cannabis industry has done really, really well. People have been upping their purchases quite significantly across North America in the jurisdictions where it's legal, and I'm sure in the jurisdictions where it's not legal either. But in any event, certainly, many of these businesses are going to struggle to meet payroll over the next short period of time. We've been advocating with the government of Canada, who are in fact today going to be introducing a bill to provide a wage subsidy for small business, but our finance department in their wisdom determined that in fact they wouldn't make that relief available for public companies, whether they're small businesses or not.
Small businesses that are needing to be fined, sure.
Correct. So we engaged in a quick advocacy process yesterday. We issued a statement by press release. We wrote to the finance minister and the deputy finance minister, and we engaged in a quick round of lobbying last night with different members of parliament. And we hope today, as the bill is introduced and debated in parliament, that in fact relief will be extended to public companies as well as to private companies. But I think, just stepping back from the day-to-day, my expectation is that because governments around the world have acted so quickly to ensure that the liquidity in the banking system, in the finance area, generally speaking, is preserved. And I think this was one of the big takeaways from the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, was that although governments eventually moved very quickly and with enormous amounts of capital behind them to restore liquidity in the markets, in retrospect, they would admit that they were too slow, probably by 6 to 9 months. And so this time, central banks and governments have moved very quickly to ensure that there are no liquidity gaps in the system, whether it's mortgage finance, trade finance, and so on, that basically the financial institutions who are delivering services to businesses are in a position to continue to provide that capital without interruption. So I think when we do get through this, the crisis over the next few weeks and months, the rebound is going to be very prices of equity securities rise. And otherwise, I'm getting a connection unstable.
We're back.
Again. We're back.
Hey,
okay,
this is life right now for everybody. Get used to it, folks.
Yeah, exactly. We got an email from our conference bridge provider yesterday, by the way, begging us not to schedule meetings for the top of the hour. Because apparently the North American telecommunication cred nearly falls over every hour because everybody's dialing in.
That's amazing. Like, this is one of those unintended secondary consequences of work, right? Yeah.
Exactly. No, they said schedule meetings for 15 and 45 past the hour. Please, please, please.
I do mine on the 22s, but that's okay. Anyways.
There you go. So anyway, where I was
Hang on a second.
is,
wait a minute. I missed a joke opportunity. You do yours on the 20s. This call started at 4:20 for those
4:20 Estonian time. There you go. Like I said, the jokes don't get old.
I know. It's not going to stop with me either. Continue.
Anyway, where I was headed is that, my sense is that when we do get through this, the rebound, both in the capital markets and in the real business world, is going to be very quick. Our job right now is to really help the companies that and more importantly, the employees who are going to be in distress over the next few weeks and months to get through this time. Because, as I say, I believe the rebound will be quick and sudden, and will surprise people, I think, as to how fast it comes back. But we really do have to pull together to help folks over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and you talk about relief. As an entrepreneur, I guess I don't really trust the government to solve my problems. I think that, you talk about the public market company relief, the public company relief is basically nil. It's like, well, I have good news. The private company relief ain't that great either. It's just, and for the amount that we're asked to contribute, especially in Canada, which is fairly high on the corporate side. It's like I mean, maybe it's an entitled view, but and I'll talk to a tax lawyer tomorrow and kind of get a better perspective. But I feel like the response was not aggressive enough. But then again, I guess we all are out for all self-interest, right?
Well, I agreed, Dimitri, and when we were having a chat ahead of this, we were talking about, again, some of the basic issues in Canada. And one of the things I've always said is that we don't need to worry about the entrepreneurial spirit in Canada. It's alive and it's well, and it's one of the most dynamic in the world. The issue is not people starting businesses. It's actually helping those businesses, once they're off the ground, grow, and to ensure that the entrepreneurs can see, in effect, the fruits of their labors once they've begun to achieve success with the companies. And that's a real issue in Canada, because the tax regime, whether it's on the corporate or on the personal side, just isn't competitive with most of our trading partners. And that's, again, just as we talk about bigger picture issues as time goes on, that's really something that we do have to address.
Well, and that's going to happen when our government is effectively run by entrepreneurs, and that's never going to happen because entrepreneurs typically stay away from large established systems, and they like to create their own things, as you have done. So there's a little bit of a
They don't have the patience.
Fair. Hey, I get it. So I guess in closing, it's interesting to think about some of the stuff you talked about. For example, there's a strong entrepreneurial spirit in Canada. There's a strong entrepreneurial spirit. For example, there's clients of ours that are going to be listening to this in Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is an entrepreneur business city. There's clients of ours listening to this in Perth. Well, we talked about natural resources. If there's two markets that are more connected in the most furthest regions in the world, it's going to be mining. That's between Vancouver and Perth, two of our markets, and we know our clients are connected in those markets. You talked, oil, obviously our clients in Calgary. There's no lack of entrepreneurial spirit anywhere, and there's a demand, for capital in order for entrepreneurs to realize their dreams, in order for entrepreneurs to build and scale companies that then create jobs and create opportunities and create economic growth, the capitalist engine of economic growth that improves the standard of living for everybody. So I think in a lot of ways, you might say, hey, I was a lawyer and I'm a businessman. I think a lot of entrepreneurs would view you as somewhat as a humanitarian, because nothing drives the standard of living for any society higher than free markets. I had a chance to see I went to Nordic Business Forum last year, and it was the CEO of the company that my goodness, how am I missing the name? Everybody knows this, but they got bought out by Amazon. It was the company that does food, like the retail store that does like healthy foods. Whole Foods, yeah. John Mackey, I think was his name. Is that his name? Anyways, the CEO was there, and he gave us a chart, and he showed how amazing for growth free markets are, because people are able to work towards their ideal vision, and they put all their energy and human spirit into it, and then they create opportunities, and other people jump on board. And where does that all start? Well, it starts at the ground level. You got to start for it to start, And so when you think about what really contributes to the growth of an economy, to employment, to standard of living as created by the growth of the economy and the employment, that starts with an entrepreneur saying, hey, I have an idea. And you give us a vehicle and empower us to make that idea become reality. And that's a pretty big thing. That's a pretty awesome thing. And I really was really excited to talk to you, because I think what you're doing is really cool. It's a business opportunity. You're doing it in the interest of business and all that. But at the end of the day, the outcome is a lot of people are better off because of it. So.
And that's where our passion and commitment comes from. We have an opportunity to, as you say, help a lot of really interesting folks realize their dreams. And as you say, the benefit of that is employment, wealth creation, and better living standards for more people. And that's not a bad approach.
Helping people help themselves I found creates a lot of opportunity. Richard, I appreciate your time. Obviously, going to tag you on LinkedIn so our clients can reach out to you and talk to you. I'm fascinated by this topic, and obviously what's happening in the world right now. There's, some issues, but the spirit doesn't die, and the people that are going to be watching this, I think a lot of us are going to be looking for the opportunity in this, and there is an opportunity in this. And you also alluded to bouncing back, and that's big.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I have to say, I look forward to my next opportunity to wear my LGFG suits instead of my lumberjack shirt. But
Oh, stop it.
but I may have to actually go shoot a deer for dinner later on today, so I've got to be.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that too. The world is getting there. Thanks for joining us, guys. I'm going to publish this. Cheers.